Hey guys, welcome back to Coffee and Crystals. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am your yoga instructor, your hostess of the show, and on this podcast, you're going to learn not just about yoga, you're going to learn about wellness subjects, and you get invited into my heart where you meet my mentors, my gurus, my family members, friends, people in the community. I make you laugh, I make you cry, which is exactly what the point of my book is. I love sharing the wisdom that I've learned over 500 hours of yoga teacher training. I've also been in the corporate world for over 15 years. So although it might seem like I do what I want, I also am highly educated in the professional world, in the yoga world, and I like to have fun. So thank you for being here. If you want to take a moment right now, a free way to support the show is to click follow. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube if that's where you're watching. Make sure you're following on the podcast of choice. Another way to help, a free way to help my show grow would be to make sure that you make a comment on the show, share the show on social media, give it a review. Please, if you take the moment to do this, I do all the marketing of this show by myself. So all of these efforts just help support me and help the show grow. So I know I told y'all I was taking a break for the summer to focus on writing, and I really thought that I needed that space to step back from the podcast and dive into the writing and really focus on the book. But in the short break, literally really short, I think it was only a week, I realized that it wasn't the podcast that needed space. It was actually something deeper. Some habits that I was holding on to that were getting in the way of my clarity and my creativity, like alcohol, was just having 2 drinks out with friends the next day for me would sometimes really be ruined. The clarity, the discipline, the energy to write, all of it was just out the window. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll just smoke some weed instead and utilize some gummies to unwind instead of having wine with friends. But then there was this little whisper inside that said, what if you try cutting back on weed as well? And honestly, at first, I didn't take that whisper so seriously. But when I did, wow, guys, the withdrawal systems have been hitting me hard. And I realized that there was so many areas in my life that I was numbing myself. My therapist and even my doctor have told me in the past that I needed to quit weed and that they thought that I was numbing myself. And although I'm super productive and, can do a lot on weed, I wasn't listening. I wasn't listening to them. And just by fluke, I decided to take this break. And the way my body is reacting to not having marijuana in my system has been mind-blowing. So let me be an example to you guys. If you're out there and you think that you do not have an issue with weed, try taking a break from it and circle back with me and let me know how that's going. So instead of quitting the podcast and taking a long summer break, I am quitting the fixes and I'm going to go full throttle into this book and share my truth, and it's going to be all natural. So that goes for the podcast too. But this leads me to season 5, and season 5 on the podcast has been inspired by something personal that I've been writing about, and that topic is daddy issues. I just finished reading Carrie Soto is Back. I'm going to totally drop the link to this book in the show notes because if you guys want a summer read, this would be it. And she loses her dad in the book. Oh gosh, I think I just ruined a big part of the book. Sorry. And I was thinking about the father figures in my life and how I didn't grow up with one or didn't grow up with a consistent dad figure, but how I needed to change the narrative on that and realize how blessed that I am, that I have many father figures. And if I leaned into that and poured into the energy of the father figures that are currently in my life, how much I could learn from that and how I could lean into how grateful I really am to have all these different men in my life that really care about me. So yeah, a lot of my book I'm releasing these emotions and telling these stories of what it was like growing up without a father. But I think what's really cool is I can weave into the story all the really great wisdom that I've learned from these father figures in my life. So in honor of Father's Day this month, I'm kicking off a series of conversations with these men in my life who have played a major role and continue to shape who I am today. And while this is still unfolding in my personal life, there is also something major happening in LA right now. It was an interesting weekend here in LA, to say the least. Saturday after work, I got home and I kept hearing sirens and fire trucks and police speeding towards the heart of the city. And I honestly, I'm not like big into the news. I go on Threads and Instagram and TikTok, and I was starting to like see a little bit about protests and people getting upset about ICE. But even my boss had made a comment like, please make sure you close the door, when I was in corporate this week, because, you know, ICE is out there taking people. And I don't know. This is going to sound really naive, but at the time I was like, is that just like a weird joke she just made? I just really haven't been watching the news. But as you guys know, there has been some major protesting happening in LA. There is a lot going on in the city, and why I was recording this episode with my uncle, Tom Chronister, who you are going to meet, I didn't realize that Trump had sent 2,000 National Guard members into the city and that things were starting to really stir up. I did notice that like it was really quiet in LA, because usually I gotta like close the door and make sure like the noise of the city wasn't getting into the episode. And once I got done recording with my uncle, it just was eerily quiet. And it's been an interesting couple days in LA, Sunday and Monday. It is now Monday evening. You're going to hear this episode on the Tuesday after all of this. So a lot is going to unwind in the city, but I really thought it was an interesting time in history to kind of document that here on the show. And I know there's a lot of feelings. I can feel the emotion. I can feel the fear in the city. And I just want to send everybody love and healing. It's been unsettling. It was a little scary for me. I'm like, should I be outside? Should I not? But the truth is I don't let fear run my life. And everyone's been checking in on me to see if I'm okay. And yes, I am okay. I'm actually very grateful that the protests have been mostly peaceful. And yes, I know there's videos out there showing that there are a lot of things that haven't been peaceful. But guys, to all the historians out there, can you guys give me an example of when there is big events like this going on in the world and when a protest had been peaceful after these events? There's a lot of angry people and there's some big events going on. So that to me makes conversations like this even more important. Connection. I think so many times when people are disagreeing and there's a lot of anger and fear and hate going on, you can feel even more disconnected. There's, I think, something that Uncle Tom and I have in common is, as a chronister, we can definitely be yappers. And in this episode, we just kind of scratch the surface of our story and our family and what fatherhood looks like across our generations. But what I do know is Tom is a Navy veteran, and just talking to him off camera after this interview and hearing his thoughts on the matter and just getting different perspectives has really been helpful for me. So I think if you have someone in your life that you can talk to about these things, unfolding literally as I was recording with my Uncle Tom, and I didn't even realize how serious things had gotten until we wrapped it up. And it's a powerful reminder that we are living through a really real, very life-changing time in history, especially in LA, which makes this conversation even more important. So Uncle Tom and I could literally talk forever. We're professional Chronister yappers, but in this episode, we just scratched the surface of our story, our family, what fatherhood looks like across different generations, and there's been a noticeable absence of dads in some branches of our family tree. And while some of us, like Uncle Tom says, may not resonate with the term daddy issues, it has been a thread and a pattern that I've noticed in my family. And we're going to start acknowledging and unpacking that today. I'm also really proud of him. He's one of my favorite people in my life, and he's also a writer. He shared with me on this episode that he wrote an essay called The Last Christmas, and it was about a road trip that he had with his dad one Christmas down to Florida to visit my grandmother that he wrote, and he had my grandmother edit it. And he said this off camera, but that she didn't actually really agree with how he ended that essay, and that moment had taught him something personal and powerful that I'm going to share with you guys in my words, is that you can rewrite your own story. If a version of your truth doesn't feel aligned and it doesn't serve you in healing, you can shift the narrative. And that's what I took from that lesson, from the lesson that he got from getting some backlash around the way he told a story of his dad from a family member. And it's really helped him in his healing process. So I think that theme also ties beautifully into the current energy of everything that's happening in LA, but also on Wednesday, which is going to be the day after this episode drops, it is going to be the full moon in Sagittarius. So the full strawberry moon happens on June 11th. And I thought I'd talk about this a little bit too, so you guys can pull in the energy of this moon. We are going into the long nights of summer, and it's the time to explore your beliefs. It's time to seek your truth, and it's time to embrace spiritual expansion. It's time to shed outdated stories, things and stories you're telling yourself that no longer serve you. And it's like ones that you carry from childhood and you pass that into new generations. So now is the time to change the narrative and to replace these stories with something good, something more aligned to healing, something that's going to bring peace and love into the world, but most importantly, into you, into your truth. So you may feel some emotions rising right now around the full moon, and that's not a bad thing. Drop into it. The full moon brings emotional clarity, spiritual growth. It invites you to get honest with yourself. So let's connect more deeply today on the show. I can't wait for you to meet Uncle Tom. And without further ado, I introduce you my uncle. We call him Hunk T in the family because one of my good friends named him that when he was at my birthday party in Fort Lauderdale. I think it was at the W Hotel one summer. And we call him Hunk T because he's a good looking man. So I introduce you one of my favorite people, one of the one and only Hunk T, Tom Chronister.
All right, we're good, right?
You're going to be recorded for this call. I have to say that in California law so you don't sue me.
Oh, is that what it is? In California law? Okay.
Coffee and crystals is like my version of church, you know? These conversations probably will, I always say, are going to change my life. I like to do a little fit check with my guests. What did you decide to wear today? What is the
Well,
hat?
hold on. All right. So this is a shirt that I got down in the Florida Keys. I love the Keys, so I am wearing a. It's kind of like a spearfishing uh, shirt.
So now you're making
And,
me think. When was the first time I went to the Keys? Are you the reason that I have the Keys disease? Did you put that into me, or is that just a Florida thing that we all get?
um, how's that? Does that look okay to you?
Yes.
Something like that? Is that good?
That's
Okay. So I now you see my bar behind me.
yeah, I've drank at that bar. I've gotten loose at that bar. I love this. What is that machine? Is that your margarita machine?
Oh, yeah, that's margarita machine. Uh, all the way over to the right. Next to that is a countertop ice maker, and then
And why is that special to the bar? I feel like you told me when I was in town. Just extra ice.
this extra ice. I mean, sometimes when you have the ice out of your refrigerator, it is not it. After a while, it gets kind of nasty. You know, so with this, we pour nice, fresh, um, like either spring water or whatever. So how's that? Is that okay?
Perfect.
And there's
Ah,
my bald head.
great. Love it. Did you bring some coffee this morning? Have you already had coffee?
I did. I did. Here is
Let me see your
my
favorite
coffee
mug.
cup.
Okay, Fred's Breakfast Club. Where's that? What does it say at the bottom?
That was what I was telling you about New Hope, Andy's little town there, and Fred's is a historical icon. Um, when it comes to going and having breakfast. So you see on the back here,
Come, sit, speak, stay, and a little paw
right,
print.
right, and you have the little dog on the front, and
I love New
so
Hope too.
so this cup holds quite a bit of value. Whenever I'm drinking out of this, Andy just like, oh, Fred's. So
That was a good impression of Andy. I picked I picked this cup for you this morning. It's like the
and what is
closest
that?
thing to an American flag. I got it at some fair down in Santa Monica over a 4th of July holiday 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a
Yeah,
veteran in my life, this mug was picked for you.
thank you.
Well, let's see if two chronisters can get these questions in 30 minutes.
Okay.
We're known for yapping. We're
Well, I wrote
storytellers.
things down, so I will try to do that. I will
Um,
try to do
I
that.
feel like the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is where Chronister comes from. I chat GPT'd it the other day, and I know that you
Yeah.
actually have a little bit more of depth of that than ChatGPT, but ChatGPT says the chronisters come from a line of historians and scribers. And I resonated with that because I do feel like the teachers in our family, the chronisters are always teaching people things. We're definitely scribers. A lot of us are writers. We love to be storytellers, but you've got a little bit more intel on where the chronister name comes from. So I'd love to be reminded of that.
Well, um, Chronister is actually an adopted name for my dad because there's history there that kind of it goes all over the place. But so I haven't really focused too much on where the chronisters come from because it's not really in our bloodline. You know what I mean? So, but I do know that the name chronister that obviously comes from Charles Chronister, Papa, and so uh, that name is means timekeeper, and from what I gather, it's a Pennsylvania Dutch uh, kind of where it kind of started. I think I mean, it's German,
Yeah, that's what
obviously.
Granny would always say. I remember
Yeah,
doing projects at school about our name, and it would always be around Pennsylvania Dutch. So, what would be the
right.
name that I should kind of concentrate more as far as our bloodline?
Well, Granny was a Tate, so her maiden name was Tate, Tate. So from what I gather, and it's the older I get, the more I kind of want to know about things. But um, you know, they came from, uh, as far as I know. Don't I mean, yeah, of course I'm getting quoted on this, but It goes from a long line back as far as like I believe Ireland, and the Tates were a known name in Ireland, and from what I was told was that they were sugar barons. So the Tate was a very well-known name in Ireland, you know, centuries of being sugar barons. So obviously they were in the sugar trade, and probably had some wealth. Uh, I don't know where that all went,
Yeah, right.
but yeah, but yeah, so that's what I'm told. And there's a few of my father's cousins that are out there that probably have some more information on that, and that would probably be a good place to go. But some of my friends on Facebook, cousins. Uncle Bill would be another one. Bill Chronister would be another one that would be able to guide us in the right direction on that. So
In two
that's
days,
that's
we would celebrate Granny's birthday.
say again.
In 2 days, we would celebrate Granny's birthday. So I'm going to have to count back on how old she would be, unless you know.
I think let's see. She was about 88 when she passed away, um, and that was back in around
I'll figure out the
19.
number so we can celebrate accordingly on the
Yeah,
10th.
we'll have to do that. Yeah.
But yeah, Uncle Bill is someone that I pinpointed as a final editor for the
Mm-hmm.
book that I'm publishing this year.
Oh, nice,
I
nice,
think that
nice.
he will be able to, when I had a blog like 5 years ago, he would always be like, actually, Granny like went to the same high school as Bill Clinton and Gloria Swanson. Like he has all these little facts
Yeah,
about Granny that I think will be really
yeah,
helpful as I'm writing our story.
yep, yep,
Um,
sure did. Hot
Coffee
Springs,
and Chris,
Arkansas,
what was
or
that?
Arkansas, yeah.
Yes. Coffee
Mhm.
and Crystals started. I don't know if I ever told you why I started Coffee and Crystals.
Mhm.
It was my 400-hour completion in Costa Rica. I came out of a meditation, I'm in the jungle. I had my coffee because how yoga school usually is set up is you have contemplation in the morning. It starts at like 5 a.m. and we all do
Mhm.
our little homework and we're reading and we have our coffee before we step into a 2-hour practice that starts at 6. So I still had my coffee mug and like the crystal that I had brought to my mat. And I was just kind of looking at it. And, you get a monkey mind in these things. People think you go to yoga and you automatically have a brain shutdown. So then some people don't experience a brain shutdown. So that's why they don't go to yoga.
Yeah.
So here I am with my monkey mind, literally in a place where monkeys are jumping around in the tree, distracting you even more. And for some reason, the little thought came to me and was like, you're going to start a podcast and you're going to call it Coffee and Crystals. And you're not only going to be able to teach globally yoga concepts, but you're going to be able to storytell. You're going to be able to host people that you love and care about and hear their story.
Yeah.
So Coffee and Crystals has really helped me kind of find my voice as a yoga teacher, but also helps me, like in conversations like this, piece together how I'm going to tell my story, which is going to be called Katie Chronicles. I'm calling it Katie Chronicles so that I can write several books and maybe even inspire a family member to jump in there and tell their viewpoint.
Yeah. Okay.
So, welcome to
That's funny
Coffee and Crystals.
because that people used to give me, different nicknames when I was a young kid. Children sometimes are very cruel, but in this case, it wasn't too bad. But that was a nickname that they called me, was Chronicle, instead of Chronister. So and that goes with our name, chronological. Each thing is set in time and listed. So all those words come together, and you think, oh, Chronister. Now it makes sense. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I picked a crystal for you. I'm going to have to mail it to you. When my guests are in the studio, I usually gift them a crystal and we talk about it on the episode. So,
Oh, nice.
nothing for you to do, but just listen and see if it resonates with you. And then I'll get it sent down to West Palm Beach where you live. But I picked the Chalcedony, It's really pretty. It's marbly. It has some purple colors. And you are my mother's brother. So this crystal is a nurturing stone that promotes brotherhood and goodwill. It absorbs negative energy. It brings to the mind really good healing spirit and harmony of brotherhood. And it helps you kind of create a really great healthy sense of emotions so that you can stand in that role. So hopefully
Okay.
that resonates with you and you can put it
Love it.
more special in your house
All
and
right.
kind of absorb that healing energy that you might need. Do you do yoga? I mean, I know you don't like do yoga, but what's your relationship with yoga?
Uh, well, my relationship with yoga is that I am not a very flexible person. So yoga and I don't get along. But in my years of trying to exercise and doing CrossFit, there were a lot of stretches that I became familiar with, um, and I am finding though, with talking with a lot of people, that yoga can be very, very good for your heart and soul and everything. So it's not something I'm against. It's just that I have never been a very flexible person uh, physically.
Yeah. Fair. And honestly, that's actually a reason where I started yoga because I couldn't touch my toes. And I've
Oh,
always been surrounded by a lot of dancers and flexible people. So it was almost like a little bit of jealousy I had around that. So I kind of started yoga because I wanted to be more flexible.
mm-hmm,
But a little yoga lesson for you is there's two pillars in yoga, and one is strength and one is flexibility. So I'd say
mm-hmm,
that a duality that you have and are, really in kind of a role model in for me in my life is strength.
mm-hmm,
So you
mm-hmm.
can kind of know that your yoga to me when I look at you is just like your strength and your passion and for family. And you mentioned heart, and you probably have more heart than anyone I've ever met in my life.
All
How
right.
do you
Thank
define
you.
success?
How do I define success?
Yeah. You've
Uh,
been so successful, but I know I personally struggle with imposter syndrome. I can accomplish a million things, but I struggle with always feeling like I'm not good enough and it's not good enough. But for someone like you who's been really successful, how do you feel successful or how do you even define it?
well, I mean, there's different types of success. You know, uh, like we're talking about success with family, success as a parent, uh, financial success, successful status, or educational success. Um, a successful person is somebody that I would say uh, overall has uh, set some goals and achieved them. So no matter what they are, so you might have a goal of someday being a millionaire, but you might not succeed at being a millionaire, but maybe you made $900,000. So are you successful? Sure, you are. You didn't reach that goal, but or can you say you're a successful parent? And how do you measure that? Um, well, you measure that by whether your kids made it. Did they make it? Are they relatively successful? Are they good people? Uh, do they have morals and things like that? So when sometimes your success is based on um, the things that you uh, brought up and nurtured in life, and if you can look down to that and see that that's successful, then you succeeded. So I don't know, success. It's got a lot of definitions, but I would say overall, you set a goal, and sometimes you don't have any choice but to set a goal. Like when a baby comes into your life, you might have several goals in that. Well, I'm going to make sure that this child is never without a father, or I'm going to make sure that this child doesn't get in the same type of trouble that I got into when I was a kid. Protect this child and things like that. So you have all these different things that you put into place, and you just kind of work every day to be the best you can be, and that can be success. Being just a good person. At the end of the day, on your last day, I'd say a good mark of success, they say, is how many people show up at your funeral.
Yeah.
So what's that success? Was it because I don't know, you gave to the community? Were you just a good person? You were always there helping people. There's different reasons for that, but we don't know how that's going to turn out. But they say that's one measure of success is the amount of people that showed up at your funeral. I'm hoping that I live to the point where any of my friends are not going to show up at my funeral because they've all gone before me. So,
Punk T lives on.
yeah, right. We'll see how that works out. But I got good daughters, and I'm very proud of that. Um, hey, I had a goal one time. One of my most favorite successes in my story was I wanted to get out of my hometown of Allentown,
Which
PA.
is, where did you?
Allentown, PA. Well, I grew up in Allentown, but I mean, I was born in Michigan, but my
That's
goal,
what
one
I
of the
thought. What city in Michigan were you born in?
Dearborn,
Okay. And then I
yeah,
was born in
Dearborn,
Allentown, where you grew up.
right? You were born in Allentown. So my goal was I'm going to get the heck out of Allentown, PA. There was just nothing for me there anymore. And so a couple of my friends were going into the military. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go in the military too. So one of my best friends, who actually got stationed down in the Florida Keys. So I got to, experience the Florida Keys before I went into the Navy. And I said, I'm going to do everything I can to get stationed down in Florida. I'm getting the heck out of Allentown, PA. So joined the Navy, and
Were
I
you
went
one of the
into
first chronisters to get to Florida then?
to live to Florida.
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah. So you were there before Granny and Papa were there?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
They were there. Gosh, I used to go visit them, probably when I was close to 15, 14, 15, maybe. So
Okay, gotcha. So you had a
maybe they
goal to
were
get to
there.
Florida.
Maybe they were there around 74, 75,
Sounds right.
1975. So I used to go and visit them. But just with that, so I went into the Navy. I went into something I loved, which is if you don't find something you love, then success is a difficult thing, at least on successful employment and job satisfaction and things like that. But I just was always amazed with airplanes. And so when I went into the Navy, it was kind of the first time I ever succeeded educationally. We all say, oh, these people that are first in their class or second in their class are all a bunch of nerds, right?
Hmm.
Well, I had finally found something that I loved. And so I ended up being second in my class in aviation apprenticeship school, which gave me the
Know that.
opportunity. That gave me the opportunity to have orders to wherever the choice of orders that they had, and the, there was a set of orders that went to Jacksonville, Florida. Yes, I'm going to Florida. So the first guy didn't choose Florida. I thought he was going to, but he chose another duty station, and I did it. I did it. So that was a measure of success right there. That was my first real success where I set out and I did something. I was second in my class. First time I was ever even close to being, top of the class, and did that. And so that's the history. That's how I got down here.
How many years were you in the Navy?
I did 7 years active and I retired from the reserves. So I was in and around it for about 24.
Wow.
So yeah,
So
I
what
miss
is
it in
that?
some ways.
You do?
I miss it in some ways. There's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of friends, a lot of my old, buddies that I still communicate with now. We just have stories and we go over the stories. So it's fun. Good place to start. I recommend it to anybody really if you don't know, if you don't know what your kids should be doing, instead of, trying to force them to go to college and things like that, the military is a good option because um, it sets them on a path to a little bit more discipline and um, any job you want is in the military. If you want to just work administration and work in an office, you can do that. If you want to, you know, be a barber, you can be a barber. Especially like in the Navy, because you're on a ship out at sea. Somebody's got to cut the hair, right?
Yeah.
So they actually had ship
Never thought of it
servicemen.
this way.
Yeah, and cooks and you name it, anything in the Navy. So I did that, and it was good to me, and I'm happy. It was probably the best decision I ever made. As an adult, you know. So
So our connection has really threaded through in my life. I'm going to be 40 this summer. That feels
40 is a good age, though.
okay, good. That's good to
It
hear.
is.
But
Yeah.
it's funny because we kind of, I mean, we've always been close, but in this period of my life and needing some extra income, here we are again, like back to working together. So tell my listeners a little bit about what you do for work, and how I get to kind of, well, you don't have to mention how I'm helping you, but I am helping you with something that you're working on. So explain that to my listeners.
Uh, well, I we talk about success and goals and things like that. I did my first, 7 years in the Navy as what's called an airframer. So I worked on airplanes and did all kinds of things for airplane structures. So, uh, and then when I got out of the Navy, I worked for Sikorsky Aircraft. So I traveled all around working on Blackhawks and Navy, Navy Seahawks and different types of helicopters. And
G6.
no, well, that was later. That was
Oh, okay,
later.
okay. That's
So,
song for me.
so there's a certification that's similar in a way to being a pilot, and it's all regulated by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. So if you um, have experience in aviation, you can get this certification, and it takes a bunch of testing and things like that. So there's a bunch of tests, and then once you take those tests, then you have to go to what's called a designated mechanic examiner. And so the designated mechanic examiner does what's called an oral and practical exam, and we sit just like we're doing right now, except it's face to face, and you ask questions, and that person has to get like a 70% on the oral portion of it, and then there's a practical portion of it where they actually have to turn some wrenches and maybe remove and install some things and service some things and from every system on the aircraft. And so while I was working for Sikorsky, I had already known about this certification, but I thought, you know what? I qualify for it. I might as well get it. And those the Capital One commercials, right? About what's in your wallet. Well, if you have certain things in your wallet, when you go to get a certain job or whatever, if you have all these things in your wallet, then they really can't deny you at least an interview, right? Because I have this, I have that. And that certification was something I always thought was important to, for my advancement in the industry. And so I started out, I got my certification, And then I had already had my bachelor's degree from Southern Illinois back shortly after I got out of the Navy. So, and it was in vocational education. So then I started thinking about, okay, well, what am I going to do with this certification? And what am I going to do with this bachelor's degree? Because it has 2 inches of dust on it. So I began teaching for the local community college that had started up an aviation maintenance training facility. So I started doing that, and it just kind of opened up more doors by being an instructor and things like that. And then the opportunity came to become a designated mechanic examiner myself. So I became the first designated mechanic examiner for Florida State College of Jacksonville's, um, you know, program there, and so that's what I do now.
Growing it out.
Um, and also, part-time mechanic. So I work on little planes and
No
got a
big
lot of,
deal.
yeah, a lot of experience with aircraft now.
So I feel like Granny was always so proud of you. Like I definitely remember as a little girl being like, my uncle works on airplanes. Like it was something that I would literally tell people at school. I used to always tell people at school about Papa too. I'd be like, my Papa got people on the moon. I don't really know where I got that from. I think it's because I had an old business card of him that was on Granny's desk. So you two
Yeah.
were always men that I would brag about to my circle. I think it was just like something I had in my back pocket to like share to my friends about the Chronister family because it is really cool, like what you do. You're cool. You know that though, which I like about you.
Well, Papa worked, he was like a facility manager, if I'm not mistaken. He was like a head honcho for like facility, uh,
Rockefeller thing?
well, no, it was Rockwell.
Rockwell. Okay,
It
so
used to
like
be it
my
used to be called North American Rockwell, and I believe it was out of Pittsburgh, something like that. And
something.
then now it's called, I believe, Rockwell. Well, it was Rockwell International, and now I think it's maybe Rockwell Collins. Now it's changed names,
Yeah.
but that's what he did. He was a pretty high up executive. So they had a big part in rockets, to the moon, all the systems and
Okay, so I
electronics.
wasn't a fibber. A little
Yeah,
bit of truth in that.
yeah, you're. It's true. It's true. He was a big head honcho, yeah, for all the facilities, and he would travel around, and make sure that all the facilities for making the rockets and whatever they did was all up to standards. So yeah, very cool.
So in my book, I one of my chapters is called Daddy Issues. And
Hmm.
I picked that as a chapter really not for people to boo-hoo about me. And I think that that's a lesson that you actually, from a young age, kind of always instilled in me. Like it was kind of some tough love that you gave me once. You literally were like, Katie, your life was not that bad. I don't know. I probably said something that kind of annoyed you once. So you kind of set me
Oh,
straight and
yeah, I
yeah,
might.
which is
Yeah,
fine.
maybe it's tough love. Yeah.
Yeah, some tough love that you gave me, but the truth is I actually have done a lot of work. We talk about in yoga doing the work, and people might think that
Hmm.
that just means fancy yoga poses, but to me that's sitting mindfully, reflecting on your life, being conscious of how you're showing up in the world, and really looking at themes in your life and trying to understand purpose. And that's really important to me. Like, I like to every day feel like there's some sort of purpose that is beyond myself. And a theme that is coming up in my life is daddy issues. It is something that, no matter how good or bad my life was, there was a non-presence of a father and a mother, but the beauty of my story, of where I've stopped becoming the victim of it, is that I've been able to place many father figures in my life. Some people, get one amazing dad, like my cousins with you, but other people like me, I've been able to walk this life with a couple of father figures in my life. And continuing to learn how to fill that void. I chose this sweatshirt called Available because I am still single, but I think back about some of the relationships I've had, and I think a lot of them, I don't point fingers at that guy. It was 50-50 why things went wrong. I was
Mhm.
a lot of those daddy issues that made me show up a certain way, which maybe pick the wrong partner or maybe react in a certain way. So
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is I think that good or bad, the father figures in our life do have, a way, like, do they are mentors of how you show up in your life. So I haven't really done a good job, or I don't think I even knew what to ask you of what your relationship was like with your dad and what some of your earliest memories were with your father. Obviously, there's a sad ending there. But I'd love to hear a little bit about some of your earliest memories with your dad and what you kind of hold on to and your daddy issues.
Hmm. Well, for a long time, and I'm just going to say this, and you can take it the way you want. For a long time, I've heard that phrase, daddy issues. I've never really, I mean, I kind of understand the concept, but as far as my life, uh, I can't really say that I had really daddy issues. I mean, yeah, there's certain things, when you grow up, especially a boy, um, of, you're playing the games and you're doing the football, and dad's not there. So sometimes somebody has to step in, you know. And I'd say 90 to 95% of the time it was Nan. So Nan was mom and dad. Nan showed up to the games and stuff like that. And I think the most important thing is that somebody shows up. And I think I was fortunate in the fact that somebody always showed up. And it wasn't necessarily a father figure, but sometimes it was just somebody who, stepped in. But there are three or four uh, things that I think about as far as my relationship with my dad. And it wasn't a long relationship. Remember, he died when I was 7. So, but probably the first memory I have that's kind of a funny memory was, believe it or not, when I was 2 years old. I was born in Dearborn, Michigan. We moved to Detroit, and I remember one of my first winters where I could walk, and the snow was real fluffy. And I remember my dad showing me how to make a little snowball, and I put some in my hand and I threw it at my dad, and he wore glasses, and so the snow went all over his glasses, and he just sat there looking at me goofily, And I remember I probably had like my one of my first belly laughs, where you see kids do that sometimes. They're laughing
Yes,
so
love
hard,
that.
and I remember that. And then another time, now my dad was he was an athlete. He played football. He ran track, and he actually ended up going to Ohio University, and he ran track for there. I don't know how long he stayed at the university, but he was there. And we went to northern Michigan one time as a family, and I remember just being real spunky one day, and we were on the beach, and I felt like I could run as fast as a rocket. I said, "Daddy, come on, let's run. I want to race you." So you know how dads are. They'll run slowly, and they'll let you win the race. And I stopped. I said, "No, you need to run as fast as you can." And I remember Nan looking at me and saying, "I don't know if you want to see that because Daddy's really fast." And so we got on the line, and I was only like maybe 5 or 6 years old, and Nanny says, "On your mark, get set, go." And my dad took off like a rocket, and he literally left me in the dust because he was kicking up rooster tails. His feet were going so fast, you know, running straight up. He had his head back and running straight up, and just blew me out of the water. There was another time he took me camping, and I believe I was around 5 or 6 years old, and he bought this thing for me. It's called a mess kit. You know what that is? Well, you would think, what do you mean a mess? Like my messy room, or a mess I left on
I'm
the
thinking
table?
hair or like a
No,
room kit.
no, mess, and this is a Navy thing too. Mess has to do with eating. So if you're a mess specialist, you are the person that's going to be preparing the meals. So he bought me this mess kit, and it was kind of a clam shaped, and you probably see these. It's for camping, and it'll be a clam shaped pan on one side and a bowl on the other, and it's clamped in the middle, and you can see the handle sticking out. And when you open it up, it's got a cup in there, it's got a fork, a knife, it's got all the things you need. And so he bought this mess kit for our camping trip. We went with some other fathers and boys and stuff, and he showed me how to make scrambled eggs. The first time I ever made scrambled eggs was with my dad.
Oh my
And
gosh,
then
I love that because breakfast in general, just like that's like a
my,
memory that I have with
that's
you.
my thing. That's my thing.
That's
I
your
make
thing.
breakfast.
And you
Yeah, I
got that
make
from your dad.
the scrambles and yeah. And then the last memory I have with my dad is I was very fortunate that before he passed away in 1970, January of 70, and he and I went on a Christmas trip together to Fort Myers. So that's where Granny and Papa and that whole family, they would go to Fort Myers for their vacations, and that's how they began to love that. So they went from Pittsburgh. Dad and I drove down from Allentown, PA, all the way down to Fort Myers. And back then, you didn't have I-95 and I-75. We just had those coastline little state roads that, well, US 1 I think is what we probably took down, but they weren't highways like we have now. So that was a pretty good trip driving with him. So that was like my last memory, getting to spend the last Christmas with him. So,
That's beautiful. We've
but that's it.
had some fun road trips together.
Yeah, yeah.
What would you say is kind of a reflection that you've had, or maybe a value that you hold close that is a takeaway from your dad? And it could be good or bad.
Yeah, well, I'd say one of the reflections. You had mentioned this life lesson reflection. Um, do things with your kids, laugh with your kids, and most importantly, be there for them. Because dads matter. You know, I think in today's world, the uh, the family unit with the dad in it is becoming less and less and less, and it's destroying uh, every culture. I don't care what your skin color is, but if there's not a dad in the house, things go amok. You know, it takes even if you get divorced, the dad needs to be around some way, somehow, and and then there can't be the pushing away of the dad. Sometimes divorced couples, the wife will take charge and she doesn't want the dad around, keeps him away from the kids, and the dad just wants to be a dad and be with the kids. So I think it's important that they, whatever their differences are and fighting, they need to the dad needs to be part of their lives and be at the games, and and I'd also say that it's important that we make good unselfish decisions, and because what you do affects your kids,
Mhm.
you know and as the way my father passed away, it's still kind of a mystery, but you have to make good decisions in your life so that you don't get yourself in a way that is going to end your life, whether you take your own life or whether that those decisions you made ultimately was part of ending your life in you know tragedy, and so I'd say that the percentage of fathers in the home is getting up near, where it's like almost 60% of families now are like fatherless.
Hmm.
When you take all cultures together as an average, it's crazy. So even though, I just, one of my goals was to make sure I was around at least until my girls graduated high school, you know. So yeah, I got divorced and everything, but I think my daughters will agree that I was around. Um, you
Absolutely.
know, so
What, what would you say was some of the most challenging times that you had as a father of three girls, girl dad? I mean, that seems like a hard job even from my perspective.
um, well, I wrote a couple notes down here because that's quite a thing.
Loaded question.
I'd say the challenge is, when we were talking about my work and my career, I ended up being somewhat of a workaholic. I think part of that was the Navy. That when you're
I
work
have
when you're
that
in
in
the
me.
when you when you're like in the military and you're in the Navy, you have to stay around at work until the work is done. And then even sometimes if you have a shift, and you pass down to the night shift or they pass down to you, a lot of times an 8-hour day just doesn't exist. So you end up kind of getting into this, you know, thing where you're working long hours. And so balancing uh, long hours of work and then also the home life, it was a challenge. And to make sure I was there for all the games and school plays and school events. Um, both are important though. You got to work if you want to have, all the things in life and, you know, school supplies and all that stuff. So you can't push one or the other away. You have to balance it.
Yeah, people
And then the next,
always do talk about like work-life balance, work-life balance. And I think people think that that means that you can just like shut down at 5 p.m. and go home to your family. But that's just I mean, I don't have a family and I'm not married, but that just doesn't seem like that's been my experience of what reality is. So
yeah,
kind of to dive into that, what advice would you give to a dad that might be struggling with this, or maybe somebody that's going to step into this role? Like, what is some good advice? Because when you say balance, like I think people think that that means they shut off after 8 hours. Like, what is an idea of balance to you?
yeah. Well, making sure that when you do get home, you left work and it's
That's a good
you
one.
left it. You left it at the office, you left it at the shop, all that.
Being present.
I think one of the most precious memories of coming home from work was my daughters running to the front door to see me coming home, and that usually included our chocolate lab.
Yeah, so it's so funny. For some reason, I could picture that and that home on the beach, the
You're
Atlantic.
right, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
coming
would
down the
come home,
stairs.
and the first one to come see me would be Coco, and she would stick her head over the balcony, and
Oh.
wag her tail, and she'd come all the way down. And then the next, ones would be, the kids would come. Now, of course, Tiffany was a little older, so it wasn't as much for her as it was for Haley and Amanda. But yeah, and then to come home and have a smile on your face and be happy to see your kids instead of kind of, oh, I'm home now. I got to deal with that.
Yeah.
So, it really, the dynamics have to be in a way where it's a loving home. And so you have to tell your kids you love them every day. And that's very important. And I think, going back to these challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges is fighting free will. I don't care how old we are, when you're little kids, you have free will. So, you can differentiate between right and wrong, even when it comes to the cookie jar, right? So you got the cookie jar, and you get the kid climbing up on the countertop. I was like, what are you doing? That child is choosing to do something they know they're not supposed to do, right? So that comes at a very early age where they're making their decisions and they're conniving and trying to figure out how they can get away with this or that. And so it's very difficult when you got several kids and several moral compasses that you have to deal with, and try. So you try to balance that in trying to get them to understand what's right and wrong. It doesn't always work, but I think the most important thing is to get your kids through high school. You get them through high school without getting pregnant and with having some work ethic. So teach them at an early age, like as soon as they're able to work, which I think in Florida is 15 now. My girls were all working at age 15. And I don't know if it was because they saw me working or maybe they just wanted their own money.
Mm-hmm.
But so, uh, getting them to finish high school, getting them there, without getting pregnant before marriage, and getting them there uh, with making their own money and understanding, you can have things that you want, but it takes hard work. So, you know, I
I mean,
look back and I look back and I wish I was more involved, because I traveled a lot with my job. I wish I was more involved. So we all have regrets, but I think it's very important that, fathers get through, uh, and you're never really through with fatherhood because they're always there. There's always something they're calling you for and need advice or need this or need that, and can I help, whatever. Can you show up for this? Can you show up for that? Now I have grandkids. So
mhm.
um
Doesn't stop.
I I think the important thing is to get through their childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood as a father with as few regrets as possible. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you don't want to look back and say, I should have gone to those games. I never went to those games. I never went to the school plays. I was always working. You have to be there. And if you can do that and give good advice based on your mistakes, because the best teacher is your own mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get them through life without them making too many mistakes. And that's a hard thing too. But that's about the best advice I can give is, be there and help get them through adulthood so that you can let them go. I think
Right.
that's even I think that's even in the Bible, right?
Right.
The child gets, finds a partner, gets married, and you have to release them. They can't be in your basement when they're 30 playing video games.
Well,
and,
without them
and
being
only
on,
we can stop that. Only we can stop that, right?
right.
So
Well, without them
anyway,
being on the show here with us, I would say that even with those regrets, all of them would 100%, 110% agree that you were a great dad. So to end
wasn't the best,
this,
but I tried.
well, that's just you staying humble and reflecting. I love it. Well, before we end this show, I was going to read you, and obviously some edits are going to be made. This hasn't hit. I'm going to have three editors on the book. My talent manager has an opinion on how my voice is going to be. But I thought I would share with you the introduction paragraphs of how I'm introducing you into the story that I'm writing. But before we do that, the inspiration of how I got into the headspace to introduce you and some other characters is similar to what I asked you about your earliest memories with your dad. So I'm
hmm
curious, in your memories, what are some of your favorite earliest memories with me?
Oh, I have a few of them. I have a
Okay,
few of
go.
them. My first real like memory of of you, because you were up in Pennsylvania and then then you came down to Florida, and I think you were just like two. I think you were just over two, and so your aunt Corinne and I, uh, we came down and we had boxes of clothing uh, that Tiffany had grown out of.
I
So we
have
come
this
in.
in the book.
So we come into the house, and you and Julie are just going through things, seeing what fits and everything. And we came up with these little shoes that I believe they were kind of like I can't describe them any other way, but like the ruby slippers from the Wizard of Oz. So
I
they were
love
these
that
little
movie.
they were little shoes with the little buckles going over the top. And you took those and you held them to your chest and you said, "My shoes."
Oh,
It was one of the first things. And Granny she repeated that for years. I remember
oh.
Katie saying, "My shoes, my
I was
shoes."
such a
And
fashionista.
oh yeah, and you and Julie and Tiffany were playing around, and for some reason you were all marching and hup to hup, hup to hup, and Julie was following behind Tiffany, and then you came running behind. You couldn't stay in step, but you were like hup two, and it was like you, the third one following, and you had those shoes at your chest. My shoes, my shoes.
Adorable.
Um, yeah. So that was the first real, just really cute memory uh, of you. And then there was also another time that I remember I brought a tent down to the house there, and I was going to set it up outside, and you kept coming up to me and tapping me on the shoulder. Uncle Tom, can we sleep in the tent? Can we sleep in the tent tonight? I'm like, well, it's raining out. I'm gonna put it up. If we can stay out there in the tent, we'll stay in the tent. But it rained too much, so we never got to camp out in Granny's backyard in the tent. But just little things like this. I
I
think
love
you were
that.
maybe
Yeah, no,
I think you were
I
five or six
remember
at the
that
time.
in the back of the lanai, the tent.
The tent, yeah. So we tried to set it up, but it was raining out too much. But yeah, there's a lot of memories. I came to soccer games, and you know, what's you see you let's see. I know Julie was in the band.
Yeah, I played
Uh,
soccer mostly.
yeah, and you played soccer, so we would come down and see you playing soccer, and just it was just it was always nice to see you guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll read this to you and kind of just see what you think. All right. Some of my favorite memories as a kid were with my Uncle Tom, my mother's brother. He would come down with his first wife and their three daughters, Tiffany, Haley, and Amanda. Their visits lifted our spirits in our home. I finally understood what people meant when they said a daughter's first love is her dad, because I got to feel that kind of love too through him. I'm going to try to get through this without crying. He had a way of making us girls feel special. He cooked us dinners, brought laughter, and helped carry the weight that Granny so often bore alone. When Uncle Tom was in town, life just felt a little bit more vibrant. We played dress up, danced to Billy Ray Cyrus, staged skating routines in the front yard. Nights were full of warmth, and our bellies were always full before bed. It was magic. I remember one visit especially well. Granny told me I had to wash my sheets and offered me the cot instead. Sleeping on the cot felt like a little adventure. I thought nothing of it. I just said, cool, let's sleep in the cot tonight. But the next morning, I woke up to find Tiffany, his oldest daughter and my first best friend, sleeping beside me. It felt like Christmas. That surprise was all Granny and Uncle Tom. They had a shared love for little pranks and joyful moments like that. As Uncle Tom's family grew with Haley, then Amanda, they even started to stay in hotels when they visited. That too was thrilling. One time, for some reason, we watched movies like Buried Alive in a hotel room, where this kind of traumatized me a little bit, but also became part of the patchwork of an unforgettable memory together. Uncle Tom didn't just bring joy, he brought a sense of family I didn't always feel. Granny often reminded us of the painful parts of our mother's story, but when I was with Uncle Tom, I could see and feel how much he loved his sister, my mom. One night, as he played the piano and sang, he looked at me and said how much I reminded him of her. His love softened my heart towards her in a way that no one else ever had. He was a connector between the past and the present, between pain and healing. He made space for us to feel, to laugh, and to be kids. He never asked for this role, but he let us pretend he was our dad. On one trip, he took us to the beach, and I started mimicking Tiffany calling her dad Daddy. As a little girl, I thought, just for today, he's going to be my dad too. He made me be brave, and he took me out to the ocean with my fins on, and he made me test the waters. I remember being very scared, being a weak new summer swimmer, but since he was out there cheering me on and pushing me, I kept kicking and I kept swimming. A great role model who throughout my life taught me to do just that. No matter what, just keep swimming. That's what I got so far. I mean, you'll read it one day, the rest of it. That's what I
Yeah.
got.
Yeah.
So on this Father's Day week, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you so much. Is
I love you. I love you too.
is there anything else you want to add to my listeners? Obviously, I feel like there's so much to unpack here. Maybe one day we'll have you back. Any last
Uh,
thought?
well, I mean, it's been one of my greatest joys, and my beginnings um, were not the beginnings that would put me where I am today. I mean, but the birth of Tiffany uh, was probably one of the major impacts to my life because uh, it just changed how I had to think about everything. And, I was no longer just you know single Tom with no responsibilities and just doing what I wanted when I wanted with my money. And it, I'm not going to lie, it took me a little bit to adjust to that, but I stepped up. And uh, and it's again, that's another one of my greatest decisions, was to step up, take responsibility, and start being a father. And one of the things I was very lucky about was it didn't take a lot of training for me, to be a father, because you know I used to change Sarah's diapers, you know, and so to step in and have a daughter and be able to change my daughter's diapers, I was making a ham sandwich in one hand, holding 2 feet in the other, changing the diaper, holding the diaper pins and in my mouth and getting it all done, by the time I was with Tiffany. So uh it it's one of the greatest joys that anybody could have uh, in life, is doing that and seeing that your children grew up and they're successful and loving people. That's another thing that you want to make sure that they're loving people. And all three of my daughters are just very loving. I call them girls, but they're women now. They're not little spring chickens anymore. So just be there and and try to make good decisions and be a role model to the best of your abilities with whatever situation you're in. And to the mothers out there that may be divorced, um, don't stop the father of your children from seeing their kids. That's one of the hardest things, is seeing guys that want to be with their kids, but they can't because there's so much friction.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's
uh,
important. The duality is important.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Tom Chronister Jr., Thank you so much for being on the show. I love you. Thanks for everyone for listening. Happy Father's Day and stay hydrated. That's a wrap.
And flexible. All
And
right. Love you.
flexible. Love you
Yeah.
too.
Love you. See you soon. Bye.